Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat, or if they're burning, you can speak up and we can address them while we're having a panel. But with that, I would like to have our members of this panel for Age and Asians introduce themselves. Maybe if you can tell us how old you are and a little bit about yourself. Maybe start with Constantine.
Hi, my name is Constantine. I used to volunteer with ACAS, and then I became a board member, and then I worked briefly as an outreach coordinator, I think, at some point. And I've been involved with ACAS in various capacities. I'm a practicing psychotherapist, a social worker by trade, and I'm happy to be here to share my experience. I'm 54 years old, young. Sorry.
Oh, maybe I'll get AW next.
Oh, good. We're doing it in a line of succession, I see. So, hi, I'm AW. I'm 37. And I have never been officially a part of ACAS before, but I've been involved in various activities over the years, and I've generally been active as a community organizer in the CCNC, Chinese Canadian National Council in Toronto, and as an artist and academic, and yeah, so happy to be here.
Thanks. And then let's have Junyi, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Junyi. I am 20 years old. I've never really been part of ACAS before. I just found out about it recently through like a mutual. But it seems like I really like what the organization does. Yeah, I'm actually out here in Vancouver instead of Ontario, unlike everyone else, but I'm excited to be here. It's nice to meet everyone.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much. So yeah, let's get started. I have a bunch of questions that just have some conversations on, and I'll get started by asking what is your experience of ageism like, and what can we learn from connecting with people across generations? How can we foster mentorship in the community? So anybody who wants to take a bite out of that question, go for it.
Well, I guess being the eldest, it really all depends on our appearance when it comes to ageism, because, and again, it depends on the context of who we're interacting with. So if it's within our own community or within the broader gay community, it really all depends on how they perceive us. I think if we present as older, meaning like with gray hair, I don't know if you can see it, then we're treated differently, right? And then, but if we present younger, again, we're treated perhaps more desirable. That's what I've seen. And then it's like a hierarchy of what is out there in the broader gay community, which is what subset do you belong to? Whether you're a muscle person or a gym person, or you're a bear, an otter, a twink, right? And then it goes from there. And then that's what I've been seeing. So as far as ageism is concerned, it all depends on our appearance, I think.
Junyi, do you want to answer, or should I jump in?
I don't really have anything as in depth of that, but I agree with you, Constantine, where I find like there is kind of like a discrimination aspect in like the gay community, especially if you like appear older. Again, it just seems like more younger people are desirable, which sucks because the way I see that is if it's like I have a 29-year-old gay cousin who's also in like the apps and whatever, and he just talks about how like I get way more messages kind of thing from like all ages, whereas he's less desirable. So I agree with you in that sense that there is like this is kind of hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about sexual desirability, yeah, like youth is definitely sort of your capital in gay life, but also I mean, just thinking about ageism more broadly, I would say like when I was much younger, when I presented more, I guess in gay vernacular, like Twinkie, but also like just young and youthful. I feel like with my family and my my Chinese community, I feel like I was very like upset with not being taken seriously, I would say. And so even it's sort of like the inverse of your sexual capital in the gay community. You're just seen as an unfulfilled person. You're not like an adult. You're not taken seriously. And I notice now that I'm sort of in the middle age of my career, I would say that I try to mentor especially young Twinkie boys, but also young women, just younger people to like assert themselves a little more, despite people my age and older appearing to not take them seriously. So yeah, I mean, at all ages, I feel like ageism comes out in different ways.
Does anybody have thoughts on how we can foster more mentorship? So my thinking was that when I was growing up, I didn't really have as many like older gay, queer, Asian folks to look up to, and I was wondering why they dropped out of the scene, or what happens to people as you get older. So I'm curious about how we can create a little bit more of that in the community.
Well, in terms of, so for example, because this is SLAM, ACAS was a place for me to meet older Asians, actually. And seeing, for example, there are doctors there. I don't want to name names, but they're the founders. One of the founders of ACAS was there, and seeing him work in the community, but still have a presence in the mainstream community. That was very good for me to see that. And the reason why I joined ACAS was this fostering of pride in our Asian-ness. And so as for mentoring and giving back, I think it's important to keep these organizations going for the next generation, because I've seen it adapt and evolve with the times. So I've been with ACAS since 2004, and the context then was so different, right? And now I'm really amazed at what SLAM is doing and what ACAS continues to do. So something's working. So now we're instilling this generation on how to adapt again to the next challenges that the next generation will face.
Yeah, I mean, the few times that I've been involved with ACAS recently, it's been as as an older person, which is funny to say, as 37 years old. I feel like I don't typically think of myself as being super old, but in the context of, like 20-year-old or even younger artists, I've been asked to talk about my practice and and sort of those kinds of things, which I think like has application across the ages, because even just like 5 years ago when I sort of no, longer than that, let's say 5 years ago, but it wasn't, it was longer than that. When I started work with CCNC, it was specifically to talk with the sort of founding members, the sort of age cohort of the founder of ACAS. And it was to learn lessons from them as community organizers back in the 70s and 80s, because CCNC had been around since then. And it was really great to see sort of progressive activists in the Chinese community in Canada, because, you know, I guess growing up in a more conservative community, I didn't have those kinds of progressive role models that looked like me. And it was great to sort of access that through this generations old community organization, just to give your, like, take lessons and give back to the community too in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. Just because, you know, again, like in the Chinese community, being gay is very, it's not, it's like something that's like kind of new. And the only other person that's older than me that like kind of a mentor to me is like my 29-year-old cousin. And we're kind of like the first generation in our family who's like coming out as gay and whatever. So we're both kind of like in this process of like learning and figuring out ourselves. So that's why I think like having organizations like these, holding panels and events, I think it's really important to be able to like network and connect with different generations.
Well, thanks. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess if can we sort of spitball?
yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, like when I think about organizations like this, even though ACAS and other Asian focused organizations are sort of formal, they obviously come to act like another family, right? Like and a kind of in what other context do you have intergenerational contact? It's only your family, like the one that you're born into, and so to have these sort of chosen affiliations through sort of mission-driven work, like connecting queer Asians, queer and trans Asians, like together, I think is a really important other example of intergenerational community that we don't get in any other context. Like it's really hard to form intergenerational sort of friendships in like school, in like, I mean, maybe work, but it's all very informal socially. So having these elder leaders in place for younger folks to access in this semi-formal way is really important.
Yeah, I was just thinking too, like, I mean, so we've talked about community organizations, but I'm thinking also about how now there seems to be more of a proliferation of like culturally specific social spaces. Like in Toronto, there's New Ho Queen, which is really exciting and feels very fresh. And I know in Vancouver, there's Rice Cake as well for like, you know, party spaces. But I think also like in the queer narrative, there's been this tradition sort of you know, intergenerational romantic or sexual dynamics in which people can learn from each other. But I feel like, you know, often it is like an older white person, and it's harder to find like an Asian daddy who, you know, who's going to be interested in like an Asian boy to get kind of that same dynamic. I mean, yeah, I don't know where all the Asian daddies are, but but like where, like, yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about like other places where I've met other people outside of, you know, community orgs to have social and even sexual dynamics with other Asians. It's especially across generations. It seems it's a little bit more rare, but it seems maybe like it's getting better.
I heard the reverse. Where are all the Asian twinks? And a friend of mine from ACAS said, you need to go to Asia. So it's the same thing, Greg. You want Asian daddies, you need to go back to Asia, where the market is huge.
That's so sad.
Oh, yeah.
What? It's a global world, and you connect instantly online, and depends on what you're looking for, right?
Yeah, there's so many Asian daddies in Asia. I mean, I guess that sounds very obvious, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, in like Canada and North America, like we don't have that sort of like that sort of stereotype to sort of lean into, you know, like where is what does a queer Asian daddy look like in Toronto? I mean, other than my dad. I mean, I guess like a 20-year-old could call me daddy. I don't know how I'd feel about that. But
You're more an uncle, AW. Not
Yeah.
a daddy yet.
I would like to. I was telling Greg earlier. I'd rather be an auntie than a daddy, to be honest.
I identify as an Asian daddy, but I feel like it's sometimes hard to find people in that dynamic.
Well, I think like the fact that you're leaning into it is important, right? Like because that sort of stereotype doesn't exist for Asian racialized folks in Canada, in the West. It's sort of like you're creating what it looks like to be a daddy. I like you as a daddy, Greg.
Okay, well, actually, this is maybe a good segue to the next topic, and I'm wondering what people think about how we find each other for dating and for romance and sex. You know, like I guess if you're older, you kind of remember before the internet, phone, and apps. But then I think like what are people's opinion on how technology interacts with our ability to connect with each other and find partners and such.
So I come from the era where we meet people at the bars, and then the bars left, and then now it's through the apps. And I can say that it's you talk about ageism earlier, that is so pronounced there, because people can read into what your profile says depending on what you list, right? And getting back to what a daddy is, again, it's what you're looking for, whether it's a physical appearance or your social mobility. Like, it really all depends. So what I'm realizing is how you market yourself is the key, and whether you put a lot of information or not. And again, we talked about appearance before, so that factors in. And if we appear younger than we are, or if we appear to be younger and now we want to make ourselves older to reach a certain demographic, it's just all about marketing. And it's what I'm seeing is the art of conversation has been slowly deteriorating through these quick chats, and it's almost like we have this inability to communicate in a more deeper level, that as opposed to being in a bar, you can just chat away, and if they say no, then you go down to the next, but you get that instant connection physically. That right, and that's what I'm seeing is different. So that when I said earlier, go to Asia, well, there's, for every one daddy here, there's like 10 over there, or maybe 20, and so your chances of rejection is far less there than it is here, because here you're competing with other subsets competing for the same daddy, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just like how you talk about how there's that like instant gratification, how like one person, like if they face rejection, they can easily move on to another person or so many people. And before you said that, I was gonna say, like, for me, obviously I grew up with the internet, so I kind of appreciate that we have access to these apps, just because I've also made a lot of friends through it, just because it was hard in university. Just being in Vancouver, it's a huge city, a huge school at UBC, and it's hard to be like selective with like who's queer and who's not, and try to find queer people. So in that sense, it's good, but there is that downfall of instant gratification. I think that's a reason why maybe like cheating goes on a lot in relationships, just because you could have so many like different talking stages of people. One doesn't work out, you're like, oh, not a big deal, like I can move on to the next person. So I guess it has its pros and cons, but yeah, I feel like overall my experience has been good, just because I haven't really pursued relationships. It's more just like for finding friends.
Well, that's cool. I mean, yeah, I mean, in bars, I would meet that, not just like sexual partners, but also like friends. But just to sort of reminisce about there was one, I went to school in Kingston, outside of Toronto, and it's a small university town, and there was one gay bar, and it was terrible. It was called Chez Fufu's, and I loved it, even though it was terrible, because like it was this sort of mishmash of everyone, like army dudes, just like hippie lesbians, just because there was only one like queer space. And then Grindr came around. I don't even remember when, but then shortly after that it closed, and I really mourned the loss of that space. And now, like, I feel like even though several of the like institutional bars in Toronto have closed or are going to close, and it's just really hard to make a run of it as a queer venue. Just the the business model is there, but in competition with apps. But I mean, it was such a sacred space, like partying for queer community, and it is kind of, I do kind of mourn it, the loss of it. And we have these sort of pop-up spaces like Nuho, and I'm not sure about the one in Vancouver, and it is very like specialized, like in terms of like being a queer Asian space, but they do kind of feel like pop-ups, and they don't feel as permanent as a place with like brick and mortar, so I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, on the one hand, it's really easy to create community online, but at the same time, there is something valuable in having something sturdy in real space, to go to be like, oh, I'm going to, and Church and Wellesley like kind of serves as that function still, as a really highly dense place for queer venues, queer businesses, bars still. But as sort of condos keep popping up, I do sort of fear the loss of that.
Yeah, I guess I feel like Church and Wellesley too is not always like the impression is for a lot of folks is that it's not always doesn't always feel super welcoming for racialized people as well, or at least that's the sort of vibe of the gay village. I have a question about, just to change tack a little bit. I'm curious, and maybe I can start with Jungi, but I'm wondering what you can be a spokesperson for your generation, but like, what are your thoughts on HIV stigma and managing it, like living with HIV? Like, are folks like, what is the thoughts on having it, on disclosing status, on preventing it? And because I feel like I've seen it change a lot around how we think about HIV, and I'm curious about what you and your peers, where does that exist in that consciousness?
Are you talking about disclosing it in terms of like when you meet people from the apps, or
anything? I guess like thoughts on like how do younger people feel about HIV in general, and what are the prevention strategies, and sleeping with HIV positive partners or managing HIV? Folks worried about it?
Well, I feel like straight people know less about it, just because it's on Grindr. You have like status like HIV negative or positive, but we also know like that we have access to like PrEP or like post exposure. So for me, and I feel like other gay people, I think we feel pretty safe about it and are open to talk about it. However, I think it is still like kind of stigmatized like straight people. Just because I was talking to this one guy, and then he was just like on Grindr, and he was just saying like, "Oh, we don't have to use a condom. I'm HIV negative, and I don't do enough gay stuff for that." But I had to explain to him like, it's not a gay disease. HIV is most commonly spread through like needles. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." So yeah, I think it's definitely just a lot of misinformation. I still need to be shared because I think it's still pretty stigmatized as a gay disease. And
Does anybody else have thoughts?
Yeah, that's kind of disheartening because of all the work that ACAS and other organizations have been doing to try to counter the narrative. There's something that's still perpetuating that myth, and so something is not connecting, or something is still continuing that myth. And so I think your generation, Jungi, like, is more aware and able to navigate the stigma and the potential shame of disclosure better than our generation. My generation, we carried that shame in the bedroom, and it led to more infections. And so your generation and even AW's generation is a little more confident, I think, in navigating, and Greg's, I think, in navigating partners and what is our value when in terms of relationships. Whereas my generation and even older, we had to sometimes choose between having a relationship and then putting ourselves at risk for that, right? And then you factor in all the other isms, and some people made some choices that resulted in them being infected. So what I've noticed is today's generation is just a little more informed, and I think they are a little more aware of their worth and value to say no, right? You may be cute and all, but this is my life, that kind of thing. That's what I've noticed, at least in my interactions with clients and stuff.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And especially, I think it kind of depends on like the areas too, because I'm from Saskatchewan originally, and it's not as sex positive there. It's not as queer friendly there, and people don't have this, for example, like readily access to like clean needles and whatnot. So I think again, younger generations is really good, and I think it's just more just liberal spaces, just because like the university has stuff about that all the time, just like sex positivity, safeness. So yeah, I think we are getting better at it. There's obviously some work to do, but there's definitely, definitely bits of progress from the generation.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I mean, sort of, I guess, being age-wise in between you both, I feel like I could be wrong about this, but I feel like I was sort of the last sort of age cohort to grow up with a residual terror of HIV in like the 90s, and like coming into sexual age in the sort of 90s and early 2000s. I'd say that since then, like the advent of, you know, PrEP and better science about transmissibility while being positive and being on treatment has led to like younger queers and trans folk being better informed, right? And knowing how to navigate their own safety and their risk profile. But then I'd say that with the increased safety practices and science among our communities, that might lead to people outside of our communities not knowing as much about HIV, and that stigma sort of still remaining out there as it being a gay disease. So yeah, like groups like ACAS have done so much work to in our own communities that it's sort of like allowed other communities not to think about it, you know. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, AW and I are the same age. I remember like when I came of age, like in the 90s, like you didn't have sex without a condom. It's like sex with condoms was like mandatory and was the only way that I knew sex until I was like 30. And I remember like, you know, not having a whole, like the first time that an HIV positive person I was interested in that we were gonna hook up, I remember having to think about it for a bit, but being like, okay, no, like they're undetectable and it's fine. But I think then eventually getting on PrEP, being like, oh, like condomless sex, like I had to learn how to do condomless sex and enjoy it. And then also now, like I don't really think twice about like having pause partners anymore. I think from being on PrEP, so it was a really interesting shift to experience. And yeah, and then when I talk to straight people, like they don't know about PrEP. They don't even get tested. Straight people do not pay attention to their sexual health. Like it's just, sometimes it's shocking. And I think that there's something to really be proud of, like to be queer and to know that that is part of taking care of our community by protecting ourselves with like all these different ways by, you know, by getting tested, by getting treated, by using barriers, by, you know, by using PrEP. There's like, I think that that's something that I feel really strongly about our legacy as queer people, which is like integrating sexual health into this larger health question, which I think is super cool. And adapting.
Yeah, and
lots to adapt.
I agree. The fact that like queer and trans folk have historically been so hyper vigilant about our sexual health, is that a plural? That like I don't want to like overgeneralize about straight people, but I feel like they're the only consequence for sex for straight people that they think about is like pregnancy, you know, and they never talk openly about any other aspect of sexual health.
Okay, my next question is, what do you think the outlook is for queer Asians in this moment in time? I feel like they're like Asianness is having a bit of a moment. And what is it, you know, how are we experiencing the shifts in racism and homophobia? I'm curious about what people think about what it means to be queer Asian right now in this moment.
I think, yeah, we are. I don't know. I feel like I'm having a moment, but I also wonder if that's having shifted I'm from Regina, like predominantly white cities, to Vancouver, where there are a lot of Asian people. Because I feel like I'm more desirable here, and I wonder if it's more because, for example, in Regina, I guess I have white guys which I'm trying to get over, but I think it's from growing up in a predominantly white environment, and it's always you're like kind of indoctrinated to think like white people are the greediest family, and in a way, because I admire them, it's kind of projecting into attraction. So I wonder, just because Vancouver is such like it's pretty Asian dominated, that's why I'm seeing it desirable. Yeah, I don't know if you guys experience that kind of in Toronto, because I know it's also more diverse there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stats are like one in 2 people in Vancouver are Asian, and like 1 in 4 are Asian in Toronto. So there are fewer Asians than in Vancouver, and I think like it does just broadly. I mean, even outside of sexual desirability, I feel like the normalcy around Asian foods, Asian culture, Asian like family practices is just more commonplace in Vancouver than even in Toronto, but definitely relative, like Toronto relative to like Kingston or Regina or wherever you're from, is a lot better. And yeah, there is sort of this, just the fact that there are desirable Asians like all of us on the call, in Vancouver, in Toronto, like it gives a kind of like some like it's sort of it gives sort of example, I'd say, of being hot queer Asians, just for our community, for the broader community, the queer community, and I think it's important, and I think it's awesome that we are having a kind of moment both in mainstream culture and sort of the representational realm, but all like movies and whatnot, but also having these queer Asian specific parties is really important, but yeah, what are your thoughts, Constantine?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think we're all on the same wavelength. If we're gonna, because I come from way back in the day, but before Crazy Rich Asians, that seminal work by Amy Wong, that was, now the name just escapes me.
Are you talking about Joy Luck Club?
Joy Luck Club, thank you. When that came out, all of us like cried, because we just saw ourselves, even though they're women, but obviously we identify with them because they're archetypes. We thought that was gonna bring us into the forefront of desirability and relatability, and then it just disappeared, and then the stereotypes kept coming, and I think the visibility of our cultures being represented in mainstream platforms is crucial, And it's not about being desirable, it's about being relatable. And regardless if again who we're attracted to, we were exotified before as the other, and now it's like, oh, your family's just like mine, except you eat different food and you have different mannerisms, but you're cool, right? So there's a resurgence in Asian culture, whether it's South Asian, East Asian, right? It's coming up, and it's like, I relate. And so what I'm looking for in a partner is our values that are common. So it's not because we're different, it's because of what we share together. Does that make sense? So, and we're not like, we say Asian, the Asian diaspora, but there's a common thread in all of us that speaks to something different from the white culture. And I think the visibility is there to say that we are relatable. It's just different. And so I think in the next 10, 20 years, I'm hoping it's not going to be an issue. And as far as dating is concerned, it's not going to be about exotification. It's about relatability. I think that's what it's going to be.
I think I was just thinking about how last year we had like Disney's Turning Red come out. And then there was also Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I'm obsessed with that film. And then Fire Island, which came out, I guess, yeah, also recently. And I'm like, Turning Red is not even necessarily queer, but I read it as very queer. It's kind of about sexuality. And it's just so much like Asian excellence and kind of like really culturally specific themes on display, which I thought was really cool. Oh yeah, and there's Shang-Chi, right? Simu Liu. I kind of was like really fascinated by how Fire Island also like, we were talking about relatability. I don't even feel like that movie attempted to make itself relatable to white or straight audiences, which was really cool. It was like very specifically like, this is a movie for queer people, and like, let's just let it be that, which was really neat. And Joel Kim Booster actually he had his Netflix comedy special, Psychosexual, and he did this bit where he told a bunch of jokes that could be told by anyone because they were about anything, and then he told a bunch of jokes about being a gay Asian man, and it was funny. I feel like people were like responding more to the stuff that was specific, even if it was not necessarily personally relatable, because I think there's an awareness of being able to bite into something a little bit deeper when you're talking about something that is really true to yourself, which I think is a really cool thing to see in this special anyway. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I add? Oh, are we running out of time? I won't add anything.
No, I have one more question. Yeah, you go.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I mean, like, also the fact that we're having a quote unquote moment is really good, because the sort of monolith of Asian representation can, with more examples in popular culture, we can sort of really dig into both the differences between Japanese Canadians, Chinese Canadians, and Filipino Canadians, but also like the tensions that we bring from our cultures, right? Because there are hierarchies. There's within Asian racism, class disparities and class hierarchies in different immigrant groups. And so I think the more examples we get and we produce, I feel like the richer our stories can be, and we can really delve into the complexities of all of that. So yeah.
Okay, so I've got one more question for everyone. What are your concerns for entering your next phase of life, and what do you want the next generation to come into?
So I'm starting to think about retirement. So, um,
As am I.
no, not yet.
Not in practice, but in hope.
No. Okay. Well, I was told that they're starting to teach, or maybe this is already in practice, but they're teaching financial literacy in high school. I think that's an amazing thing. And retirement, and also like the quality of life, and what do you want the next generation to come into? It's the continuance of valuing our worth, I think. And it only takes this. I look at Simu as an example of how fast his rise became, but actually he was building towards that, and he had to try different routes in order to acknowledge or accept that he's going to be an actor instead of like an accountant, like what his parents told him to be, right? It's that push and pull of our culture's expectations of success versus our own coming into being and being okay with that. And so I see that with more trans folks claiming their space. And I've, like 20 years ago, there were hardly, and now it's such an overwhelming thing to see when trans kids as young as 9 are coming into their own and saying, this is who I am. And and again, just seeing you guys, like from 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't like this. So I'm very confident that if we continue inspiring each other, I think that's going to serve us well.
I'm so happy to hear that like financial literacy is being taught. Maybe Jingyi, you can speak to that. But because like until fairly recently, I hadn't started planning for, the future, like financially for the future. And so while I was joking about thinking about retirement, I think it's important, especially in like queer communities, that the normative expectation is not that we have children, right? Whereas like in my family's, my biological family's sort of conception, you have children so that they could take care of you, and it's sort of this utilitarian view of children, but then at least there is that sort of weirdly obligatory planning aspect of that, whereas like I don't raise children, and there's no one even to project that terrible expectation onto, and so I'm like thinking, well, what am I going to do when I'm older, and I'm going to need care, and so I actually have to start exactly, nieces and nephews, and what if one of people don't have those, if they're. So like we're really lucky to sometimes have young people in our lives, and thankfully like some of our queer friends are having children now, but it's definitely not as common and as our straight counterparts. And so it's important to like explicitly talk about financial planning for queers and trans folk who we have to, we're making it up as we go along, and that's sort of where we have to lean on the knowledge of our elders, elder trans folk, elder queer folk who are and have been older than us and gone into their older years without younger people in their lives. So I think it's important to think about that, and I am actually thinking about like, make sure to never live in a 2-story house. Stairs are your enemy as an old person. So, but anyway, yeah. Jingyi?
I just want to say, like, yeah, I'm also really happy to hear that there's been a lot of progress made as a team in terms of, yeah, just talking about having these conversations. And congratulations on planning retirement. But yeah, I don't really know how to answer that question, Greg. But so I'll just piggyback off the classic team. I have not really taken any financial literacy courses or classes. I know they were offered in my high school, but I didn't take them. I kind of just rely on my parents and my dad to kind of guide me through it. I obviously have to learn myself. But yeah, I think kind of having your own voice in saying like what you want in your career or your future is really important because there are every couple and what you have to do that you can follow a certain like path or whatever. So yeah, I think it's just definitely good to be aware that there isn't one good path, and I hope that people still learn that because my brother he's going to take a gap year before he enters university, and I kind of look for that. But at the same time, I have like kind of my parents' ideology being like, I feel like it's a waste of time, blah blah blah. But I think that's just a lot of my parents speaking to me, and I feel like I've kind of taken a lot of like their thinking into how I think, which it kind of sucks that I still have that in the thought in the back of my head.
So you do have a younger person to project those expectations.
Yeah, and I don't want. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
On your younger brother. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Oh, okay. I don't know if I froze for a second. Can you repeat what you said? Kind of missed that.
Oh, me? Oh, I was just joking that you your sibling was the younger person you were projecting your parents' ideology on.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. Greg, did you ask something?
I was no. I was going to provide a dissenting opinion on financial literacy. I was going to say that for the next generation of people who, you know, if we're going to say that we're going to teach financial literacy in school, you know, could financial literacy classes have prepared anybody for the massive inflation and, you know, and a global pandemic and the sort of economic market that we live in today? And I have, you know, my parents are typical Chinese parents, and I grew up with a shit ton of financial literacy skills, like leaps and bounds above my peers. And yet I'm a millennial, and I like the idea of retirement for me just seems so far out of reach. And so I'm a little bit worried that if we say that, you know, if you don't attend financial literacy courses or if you don't do well in them, it's your own fault. If you enter, you know, the workforce in the middle of a pandemic and can't get a job, or if that job is a temporary contract work and it has really low wages, and, you know, and you're not going to be able to save anything. Like, I don't think RRSPs are going to be the answer for people to have a better quality of life moving forward, and neither is you know, is our public pension. So I mean, that's my dissenting opinion. I think actually, like, I would love it if we you know, and I think this is maybe like this is like I feel like Asian capitalism kind of goes hand in hand, where it's really individualistic, like everyone has to sort of work really hard to do your own thing to make yourself secure. But I think that moving forward, I think the way for careers is really going to be tied to thinking communally, because I think that we live in different ways and we can't really rely on the government or capitalism to really protect ourselves, because clearly it's not working right now. I feel like we're living through this like environmental and financial collapse that's going to be even worse for people in our next generation. And I don't think that financial literacy skills are going to save anyone. I know that's super dark, but I'm trying to envision like what, you know, aside from saying like, oh, you know, everybody's going to live on a queer hippie commune on farms in the suburbs or something, like, I don't know. I think that we're going to have to trust ourselves to be really creative, because I think that our queer ancestors were really creative in surviving through things in ways that there was no structural support for. And that's kind of what I'm hoping that I want like a better, you know, a better environmental and economic and social outcome for the next queer generation. And so I'm trying to be innovative and think about how that's going to happen outside of teaching people how to save for their RSP.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I guess let's evolve it into financial sustainability, right? So that's the catchphrase. Before it was literacy, but I think the key word is sustainability, because we don't want to just survive, but we want to be have this ability to continue living. And what you're absolutely right about what our parents and what our culture and what our community has told us before. It may not work for us, but I can tell you, I started late in contributing to RSPs, but having looked at my parents, if they didn't contribute to RSPs, then they don't have this extra income to depend on. And I think that is why there's a disconnect, because like you guys, I was like, as young as Jung-Yi, I was there. I was like, I don't need to worry. I'll just keep working. And now look, I'm at this age and I'm like, oh boy, it's just around the corner. And if there's a global downturn, there's a secure investment in some of these things. That's all I'm gonna say. However you want to see your next life, whether it's with a partner or with a community of people, you're still going to be responsible for your own direction, right? And that's the sustainability piece. And the literacy is just to inform you, like with any education, it's there for you, but it's what you do with it, right? I think that's it. So including all of the sexual navigation and all of that. So
yeah, I agree. And like financial literacy towards sustainability doesn't have to be an individualistic sort of thing. And I think like queer communities have, like you said, Greg, been really creative in surviving other pandemics, other economic crashes and downturns. And I think the fact that we have these models and queer and trans elders who can teach us these things, and at every age we have to sort of pay it forward to younger people, the lessons learned, and imagine new models of sort of surviving and thriving and helping each other. And so even super traditional like things like buying a house seems like a super individualistic thing that, you know, may seem out of reach for folks with like precarious employment coming out of the Great Recession. But I mean, like new models of community home co-ownership and are emerging, and just but you still sort of need basic understanding of both personal finance but also macro finance, and so that you can actually understand what the stock market is and be angry about what it is. You know, and so both macro and micro economics is really important to understand.
Just realizing that it's 5:12. I'm wondering, I guess Tom's our audience. Tom, if you have any questions, or if you are inviting any discussion for any of our panelists, or if anybody on the panel has something they'd like to say or a question to ask each other across generations, while we're all in the same room together. This is so lovely. Or if, you know, also, so there could be people who could be tuning into this discussion later. So if you have anything burning that you'd like to address listeners at home.
Maybe I'll ask all three of you. Maybe I don't know if you guys are single or AW said you had a partner. I wanted to ask, like, what is your guys's, I don't know, favorite way of like meeting people in that sense? Because right now I really did only with these apps. I'm too shy.
You're in a relationship, right, AW? You have a partner?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a serial monogamist in terms of just one partner at a time. And again, my generation, at least from how I grew up, because I grew up during the AIDS crisis, I think AW was saying that it kind of scared you. Yeah, it scared me too. So the thing that they were driving was one partner at a time. So it just got drilled into my head. And that's how I carried forward. And so one relationship was 11 years, and this current one is, we just celebrated our 20th. Now, every relationship is different. It has its challenges, and there's a distinction between sexual need and emotional need in some relationships. You have to decide what it is that you need in a partner and what your partner needs. Because we're queer, we get to make up the relationship rules. So we're informed by our culture and the media and our friends and family and all of that. We take what we can get, and then whoever we meet, we get to decide how we're going to negotiate the terms of our relationship, right? But if you follow your dick, oops, if you follow your dick, then it's going to be short term. If you follow your heart, be prepared to work, because it's up and down. What's the other one? If you follow your mind, then you're just going to get a living arrangement.
I really like that. I feel like that's like an amazing way to put it. Oh, you're muted.
I was going to say that's free therapy.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
actually,
for
that
that.
does sound like a therapy session. But thank you. That's amazing. I remember. I mean, I think just comparing, like, meeting people at a bar or meeting people online, I just feel like meeting people in person is not better. I would say just it equipped me with different skills. And also, okay, there is one aspect that was better, where I think Constantine, you mentioned about like meeting in person. I don't, like, I just remember thinking, oh, like I can see your whole person, just talking about physicality, your whole person better than just seeing a profile picture or even a dick pic or whatever. It's just, I feel like it's more honest meeting people in person, but also it's different because it equipped me with ways of facing rejection in person. I think is a lot different than facing rejection online. I think people have to, you know, be much more considerate when they're rejecting people in person, but also being able to face it in person is a good skill to have. So here's my word of elderly advice: go hit on someone you're interested in, and face either rejection or an amazing night or lifetime of fun.
Yeah, thank you. That's also a good point. Because I think I'd rather do it like organically like that. And I think it's way more honest. It feels better, I feel like. To like feel like to talk to someone in person, and it's not fake, And yeah, people are more honest. They can't
Yeah,
just
no
say
filter.
fuck you and leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they can, but not as common, I guess.
For my part, I am a lifelong polyamorous and have always been. And so I think I'm really grateful for it because I got to meet a lot of people and learn from a lot of people and have a lot of joy in my life. I'm also an introvert and I don't drink. So for me, when I was coming of age, I never went to bars because I just didn't drink. I didn't understand the culture. And I was shy. So around that time when I was coming of age, that's when there were chat rooms and then later apps. And I found that really useful to be able to come out of my shell and go on dates with people without having to be in a bar and be really awkward and not know how to talk to people or not have a drink in my hand. And I think that meeting people on apps eventually gave me the kind, like going on so many first dates, gave me the kinds of social skills to be more confident in approaching people on a dance floor. Like I meet a lot of people on the dance floor and that's kind of nice because you're kind of like looking at each other. You get to kiss each other first and see if there's a connection. I think now I'm a lot more confident in being able to meet people in person and just shoot your shot. Like the older that you get, the less that you care about getting rejected because it's kind of like, it's not personal and there's other people that are going to be interested in you and you never know until you try it. Like I've always been surprised at the kind of people that I've connected with online or in person that I didn't think would be interested in me. But like literally last month I was at a bar and this cute guy came up to me and I hadn't even noticed him and he was like, "Hi, I think you're really handsome. Here's my name. Can I get your number? I'd like to take you out for a drink sometime." And I was totally caught off guard because it's been so long since I've been in public spaces because of the pandemic, and that somebody has just come up and just been so direct like that. And I was talking, and so I'm going to give him my number. And I was talking to my friends about it, and they were like, "You know what? If somebody has the balls to go up to you and just like shoot their shot like that, they get a date." And that's how I felt. And so, and I think there's a lot of people out there who really appreciate that confidence and that directness to be like, "Hey, you know what? Like, let's just see what happens." And it's great. Like we have a fourth date tomorrow, and he's really cute, and it's been really fun to get to know this person organically. But I also really like meeting people online. I think you can also there's a lot of value to sort of learning how to do that. I think online is great because you can sort of filter people that you feel safe with before you make all the effort to go and meet them in person. And sometimes, you could, if you haven't honed your radar in who might be a good match for you, then you can go on a lot of bad dates because it's somebody that you met in a bar and then you don't really know a whole lot about them or you haven't got their vibe. So I'm of both minds, but I definitely feel like a lot of the people that I've met in person have ended up being really cool because as AW said, you are able to sort of get a feel for what their vibe is really quickly when they're in front of you in a holistic way. But yeah, I agree with that, with the advice, like put yourself out there, let yourself get rejected because that's how you become better at getting rejected. I think life is so full of rejections, not just romantically, but like professionally. There's going to be all these things that you're going to want in your life that you're not going to be able to get or that don't turn out the way that you hoped. But getting those rejections is the way to find the way to find the acceptances, and those are really joyous. So I think that's my advice anyway. Yeah, I'm agreeing.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I really like all you guys' advice. I think I agree with you, Greg, just because I'm also like introverted and I'm not a drinker. Like I don't understand bar culture. It feels so awkward there. But so I think online dating is great for that because I've been on few first dates, and I'd say I'm fairly confident in myself to do that now. And I feel like I'm at a point where maybe I don't have to go to a bar to enter career spaces. I can join activities and sports and whatnot, just whatever I feel like it. And then that way I can again move on to that more organic stuff now that I gained that confidence and like actually face people in person, whether that's rejection or actually like people, people agreeing to go on dates with you. I think rejection is really important, and if like you're right, like you're going to face it for rejection, and I think it's good to face rejection. And if you can do it in person, I feel like that's even better. It builds character. You build on your social skills. So yeah, thank you all for that. That's really helpful.
That was such a good question. I really like that. Thank you for that one. We got like 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions? This is like such a wonderful meeting of people literally across different generations of life that I don't know, I'm like, oh, I just want to keep talking.
I'm not sure if I really have a very well-formed question, but I think I'm maybe riffing a bit too off your comment or question, Greg, about Asian daddies. I guess maybe my question is about mentorship and how we find mentors and where and the gaps around mentorship. And I think that, you know, even though occasionally, like I think that also in terms of trans people and mentors, I think this is a really kind of, you know, an open and vexed kind of question around a scarcity of trans elders. And so it's not so easy to kind of collapse kind of our thoughts about elders, you know, the situations for cis and trans people together. And so, yeah, so how do we find mentors? I guess as a, you know, intergenerationally, I guess is a question, and also maybe like, what are the, what do we see as like fruitful ways of doing this? If, like through like sort of semi-formal sort of means, or even something more formal, perhaps. You know, through is it through you know, household living arrangements as well? You know, that you know household communities, or is it through organisations like ACAS? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like collapsing cis and trans experiences is not helpful, and I feel like it would require some sort of intentional, you know, if it happens in sort of organizations like ACAS, some intentional programming, connecting, you know, non-binary, you know, kids, youth with trans elders. And just because it is a lot of work, both finding a mentor and mentoring, you know, and there are just fewer, like as you sort of like go down the subgroup, there are just fewer and fewer like elders to access who have the resources, both like financially and time-wise, to be able to do that. And I think like it requires some sort of formal support to make those connections across generations. Like I remember going, it's unfortunate because like I think the pandemic has sort of ruined a lot of opportunities, but I remember going to sort of elder dances, like cross generational elder dances at like 519, where, you know, people of all ages and all sort of like mobility could connect with each other, giving, yeah. And so, yeah, so I think having these kinds of semi-formal, formal spaces, but definitely with like formal support, like financial, to make these connections happen is important.
I'm just thinking out loud, but I'm, you know, because I do think about where queer elders go. And I wonder if there's also this element that the queer scene is so much around, I think that there's a lot of that's tied into the queer scene around our spaces that are like bars and party spaces, and maybe like how can we cultivate other kinds of spaces that are more conducive to folks who are older and tired. Like I am getting old and tired. I don't know if I can go. I just went out last night to Rangila, which is a queer South Asian Bollywood event, and it was so packed and it was so loud, and I got there at like 11:30 and I had to leave at 1. I'm like, I can't stay out this late anymore. So I wonder what kinds of spaces can we create for people across generations to go to that aren't just places where you get really drunk or where the music is super loud and it's really sweaty and dancing, because I think that so much of the queer scene is kind of based around that. I wonder what else there can be.
Yeah, I don't want to hog because but I just remember timing was so important with like to attract like retiree like queer and trans folk to the Final 19 like really early, and I really appreciate that, you know, because I don't like staying up late either. Anyway, yeah, Constantine, I think you had your mic off.
Oh, so I was just gonna say, if we're gonna do intergenerational thing, I think the next thing is a queer age. Yeah, exactly. Because I know, like what Greg had said, yeah, I get so tired now and I can't even last till 1 o'clock. So there. But if food is involved, I'll come. And then if we can weave in some kind of storytelling aspect and sharing stories, that kind of thing, I think it, again, in keeping with sustainability, it's what makes sense for our community. And one more thing to add before we leave. Some queer people do not want to be the sole voice for the community. Sometimes they just want to live their life as trans folks, and they're okay with just blending in, right? And so sometimes they feel an expectation or a pressure to represent, and we have to give them that space. And but at the same time, where do we meet these mentors is through common spaces, and food, I think, is the most common way to connect with people.
Well, I would love to continue this conversation, but it is 5:30 and I want to be respectful of people's time. But yeah, you know, if anything comes up, or if people have like really interesting thoughts, you can feel free to email me anyway. I'll put my email address in the room. And Tom, thank you for tuning in and being our listener and our participant and audience member. I'm gonna put that survey link there again, and then also we'll make this discussion available for folks, ACAST members, to come and watch for the next 2 weeks, because it is so interesting. But yeah, I would like to thank Constantine, AW, and Jungi for participating. Thank you for taking the time out and scheduling this with me. And just remind anybody who is listening that our last talk is going to be on Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard with Damien Dragon, who is an iconic adult Asian performer in the adult industry, and it's going to be really cool. So yeah, tell your friends. Yeah, and thanks for participating, everyone. It's been so lovely to chat.
Nice meeting you. Nice seeing you, Tom, Greg.
Yeah, oh my God, AW, it's been such a long time.
I know.
Thanks for your
We'll catch
contributions.
up in person soon.
That would be great. All right.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.